Researchers studying causal loops in photonic quantum systems recently demonstrated something that every storyteller already knew. You cannot escape a loop from inside the loop. Today, we're going to figure out what that actually means for you. In this episode, we're going to use a German Netflix series called Dark as a lens into some genuinely fascinating territory. We're going to look at the Bootstrap Paradox, the idea that some things exist with no traceable origin. We're going to look at relational time, the physics concept suggesting that time itself might be a relationship between internal clocks rather than a background the universe is sitting in. We're going to visit Sumerian cosmology, Gnostic philosophy, and something I've been working on called the Eden hypothesis, a framework for understanding how possibility narrows into experience over and over until it either hardens into a loop or finds its way through to something genuinely new. And here's why this is worth your time specifically. If time is relational, if it only exists because something inside a system is observing something else inside that system, then the question of whether you're living inside your own loop isn't metaphorical. It might be structural. And understanding the structure is usually the first step toward changing it. I'm Chris. This is Jackdaw Patio. The string lights are on. The conversation, as always, has already started. Chapter 1. The Serpent's Knot. Or, what a small German town worked out about cyclical time that Sumerian scribes already had on a clay tablet 4,000 years ago. Lily is holding a printout of the Winden family tree. Charlie looks like the diagram personally offended him. Dr. Vega has already composed his first, actually. It's going to be a good evening.
So I've been sitting with this for 2 weeks now. This family tree from Dark. And I keep coming back to something. The Sumerians had a concept called me. These divine laws that were sort of pre-existing structures that reality organized itself around. Not rules someone invented, but shapes that were already there before anything happened inside them.
Right. And that relates to a missing child in a German town. How exactly?
Because in Winden, Charlie, the pattern, the 33-year loop, it isn't something the characters invent. It's something they discover is already there. Like the me. Like something that was always going to be the shape of things.
Or like a very complicated way of saying mistakes repeat.
Well, yes, but with wormholes.
Actually, and I genuinely enjoy saying this when it applies, the 33-year cycle in Dark isn't arbitrary. The show uses it deliberately. 33 years is the rough interval for a third of a human century. And there's a long tradition of cycles that lengthen esoteric chronology, lunar nodes, generational trauma studies, certain readings of Nietzsche's eternal recurrence. The show's writers were doing their homework.
So the wormhole is philosophically calibrated.
The wormhole is a narrative device. The 33 years is a deliberate choice about what cyclical time feels like when you're inside it.
Which is exactly what makes it feel true, even when you know it's fiction. Have you ever had a decade that felt like it was happening again?
More than I'd like.
Most of us have, love.
Chris's Eden hypothesis actually has a beautiful way of framing this. The idea is that collapse, the narrowing of possibility into a single experienced outcome, accumulates over time. And when it accumulates too fast, or in too rigid a pattern, it can create what we might call a loop attractor, a groove the system keeps falling back into.
So the Winden loop is over-collapsed.
As a structural metaphor, yes. Every character in Dark who tries to break the loop makes choices that reinforce it. They collapse their options in a way that reconstitutes the very constraints they're trying to escape.
The serpent eating its own tail.
The Ouroboros, which, for the record, appears in Norse mythology, Egyptian cosmology, Gnostic texts, and is one of the oldest symbols we have for a closed causal system.
And in every one of those cultures, the snake is what? A warning?
More like a description. The snake isn't evil. It's just honest about what a loop is.
And here's where mainstream physics gets genuinely interesting. And I'll flag this as a thought experiment rather than settled science. Some interpretations of causal loop mechanics in quantum systems suggests that information in a closed, time-like curve doesn't break causality. It becomes self-consistent. The loop is stable, not because someone designed it that way, but because only self-consistent loops survive.
So if time travel is real, only the trips that don't create paradoxes stick around.
Which means the wind and knot isn't chaos, it's structure. It's the only version of events that could be self-consistent.
And that's terrifying and beautiful in equal measure, isn't it?
It's mostly terrifying, Lily.
Yes. Well, that's why I brought biscuits.
The biscuits are good, Lily.
Thank you, Marcos.
Don't call me Marcos.
Chapter 2, The Bootstrap Paradox, or What Happens When a Cause Needs Its Own Effect to Exist, and why this might be less about physics in the lab and more about how identity actually forms. Charlie has drawn a circle on his napkin. He keeps staring at it. Dr. Vega has not blinked in approximately 90 seconds. Lily is describing the paradox as rather cozy, actually. Make of that what you will.
Okay, walk me through this again. The device, the time machine, only exists because someone from the future brought it back. But no one ever invented it. It just appears.
That's the Bootstrap Paradox, or more precisely, the ontological paradox. Information or matter exists in a causal loop with no clear origin point.
That's not a paradox. That's a nightmare.
It's actually very old. Plato struggled with it. He called it the question of the unmoved mover. What started everything, if everything needed something before it to begin?
And physics has its own version. The Hamiltonian constraint in certain approaches to quantum gravity produces a universe-level equation with no external time variable at all. No beginning in the usual sense. The universe, mathematically, may be a self-consistent stationary state that only appears to have a history because observers inside it are correlating with each other. I'll add, mainstream physics does not yet have consensus on whether this is the right framing or what it would mean observationally. But as a thought experiment, it suggests that what came first might be the wrong question. What if nothing came first? What if the loop is the answer?
That's the actual equation? For the whole universe?
Wheeler-DeWitt, yes.
The Gnostics would say that's exactly right. The demiurge, the sort of false creator figure in their cosmology, exists inside the loop. The true source, the pleroma, is outside time entirely. The trap isn't time. The trap is thinking time is all there is.
So in Dark, the characters are all demiurge problems.
Oh, I love that, yes. They're all trying to be the prime mover inside a system that doesn't have one.
And that's the emotional truth the show gets right, that the physics textbooks don't. The Bootstrap Paradox isn't just a logical puzzle. It's a description of how a lot of humans actually experience their own psychology. I can't change because I became this way, trying not to become this way. That is a causal loop.
That's uncomfortably specific.
Most useful things are, love.
So, the information theory angle. Reality as a code. If the loop is self-consistent, is it because the code of the universe only allows self-consistent solutions?
Some researchers speculate exactly that. David Deutsch worked on this. The idea that closed time-like curves in quantum computation would be self-consistent, not because of some cosmic hand-waving, but because quantum uncertainty itself smooths out the paradoxes. The loop is stable because quantum probability distributes the load.
Which is, honestly, the same move as Chris's Eden hypothesis. The original state isn't fixed, it's a superposition. And the loop we experience is the particular version of collapse that happened to be self-consistent with all the other collapses.
Right. The Eden equation doesn't say the beginning is arbitrary. It says the beginning is the configuration that could accumulate into the history we have, given how collapse evolved.
So we're all inside our own Vinden.
Most of the time, yes. The question is whether the cave has another exit.
That's the question of the entire show, actually. Spoiler, The exit is harder to use than it looks.
When isn't it?
Chapter 3. The Cave as Eden, or what an underground passage in a fictional German forest has in common with the oldest story about why the world isn't the way it used to be. The string lights are doing their thing. Lily has ordered tea. Charlie is on his second something or other. Dr. Vega has not removed the black turtleneck. No one expected him to.
What strikes me, and I've been sitting with this since I read your monograph, Chris, is that the cave in dark functions exactly like the liminal spaces in ancient myth. The threshold, the place where you step through and come out different.
Different, meaning you're now 80 years in the past and very confused.
Well, yes, but that's not actually so far from what thresholds do in mythology. The Sumerians had the Kur, the underworld you had to pass through to become wise. The Greeks had Elysian thresholds. Many Aboriginal Australian traditions have the dream time. Not a time in the past, but a level of reality underneath this one that you access through certain practices or certain places. And the Essenes, the ancient Jewish sect whose writings include some of the Dead Sea Scrolls, believed in moments when the divine light was close enough to touch, when you hadn't yet hardened into your particular self.
And the cave in dark is, as a structural narrative device, doing exactly that. It's the point where linear time breaks down and relational time takes over. Outside the cave, you're in 1986. Inside the cave, the question, when are you, doesn't have a single answer. You're wherever you correlate with.
So the cave is the place where the Eden state is accessible.
Yes, exactly that. Before the characters step through, they're differentiated, specific people in a specific time. Inside the cave, they're in the transition. The collapse hasn't happened yet.
I want to be precise here, because I think this is actually the most interesting structural point. Chris's Eden hypothesis describes the pre-collapse state as a superposition, not nothing, but all possible things at once. And the cave, as a mythic symbol, encodes exactly that. Womb imagery, the darkness before distinction, the moment before you become who you are.
I've been in a few places like that in my life. Not caves, but points where you could have gone either way.
And in modern neuroscience, this is where mainstream science is cautiously interesting, not conclusive. There's evidence from psychedelic research and deep meditative states that certain conditions temporarily reduce what's called predictive processing, the brain's constant narrowing of possible perceptions into the one it expects, which is, functionally, a partial decrease in the collapse accumulation rate. The cave, neurologically speaking.
The cave, chemically speaking.
The cave, neurologically speaking. Yes.
And I think that's why shows like Dark resonate so deeply with people our age in particular. We remember when things felt more open, when the loop hadn't quite formed yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I do.
Some experiences don't collapse all the way.
Chapter 4. Relational Clocks, or what two physicists discovered about time in 1983, what a photon experiment in 2014 confirmed about it, and why the Eden hypothesis might be the most accessible way to understand why your inner life feels like it runs on its own time zone. Dr. Vega has notes. He never usually has notes. Lily has drawn something on a napkin that looks suspiciously like an Ouroboros. Charlie has ordered coffee. Progress.
Right. Here's the part where I get slightly technical and you give me that look. And then Lily translates it into something beautiful. And then we all pretend we understood it before she did.
That's accurate. Proceed.
Okay. In 1983, two physicists named Don Page and Wheeler-DeWitt published a paper with the title Evolution Without Evolution. The core idea: if you write down the master equation for the universe as a whole, and certain approaches to quantum gravity suggest you can, the global state is timeless. There's no external clock ticking away in the background. Time as a parameter doesn't appear in the fundamental equation.
So the universe isn't aging?
The universe, as a total system, may be in a stationary state. But inside that state, two subsystems can be entangled in a way that, when you measure one of them, the other appears to evolve. Time is the correlation between internal clocks, not a background, a relationship.
So time is something that happens between things, not something that happens to them.
Exactly. And in 2014, a group demonstrated this with real photons. 2-photon entangled state. An internal observer, measuring one photon as a clock, saw the other photon evolving. A global observer, looking at the whole system, saw nothing changing. Same physical reality. Two completely different experiences of time.
I need a moment with that.
Take your time, dear.
Now, the reason this matters for our conversation, the relational time compatibility note for Chris's Eden hypothesis makes exactly this move. The collapse function doesn't have to track background time. It tracks a record, an internal clock, something inside the system that's accumulating correlations and using those to index change.
Which means the time, in Chris's Eden hypothesis, isn't absolute. It's relational. It's your time. The clock running inside the record of who you've been.
So every person is running on their own slightly different time.
In this framing, yes. Which is why two people can live through the same decade, and one of them feels like it was a blink, and the other feels like a century. They're not being dramatic. Their internal clocks ran at different rates because they were correlating with different things.
Photographers talk about this. You look at a roll of film, 24 images, and some of them compressed 30 seconds, and some of them contain years.
Yes, that's exactly it.
And in dark, the characters who are most lost in the loop are the ones whose internal clocks have become self-referential. They're correlating with their own past. They're trapped in a relational time loop that doesn't reference anything outside itself.
Which is, if you'll allow a small human digression, a very precise description of certain kinds of grief, or certain kinds of love that hasn't been said out loud yet.
Moving, perhaps mercifully, to the testable version of this. If we instrument an AI system and track the evolution of its internal clock, its accumulated gradient updates, its embedding space curvature, we should see something structurally similar to what Page-Wootters predicts. The system's time is its own. Its collapse rate is its own. Two models trained on the same data, but in different sequences, will have different relational time signatures. With current tools, this is partially measurable. Gradient norm trajectory, KL divergence across epochs, embedding curvature, emerging territory.
Can you actually measure that?
Partially, yes. And the same proxy, conceptually, could apply to a person. The question isn't, how old are you? It's, how much have you collapsed? And in which directions? And is any of that reversible?
That's the most confronting thing anyone said to me on a patio.
Good. That means it landed.
Chapter 5, Breaking the Knot. The part where we ask what the whole episode has been building toward. If you're inside a loop, your own Vinden, your own collapse pattern, is there actually a way out? And what does a German TV series, 4,000-year-old Gnostic texts, quantum gravity, and an AI governance framework all agree that exit looks like? The answer might surprise you. It surprised them.
Here's what Dark actually does at the end. And I'll be careful here. No heavy spoilers. The resolution doesn't come from someone outsmarting the loop. It doesn't come from better technology or more information. It comes from someone being willing to not exist inside the loop anymore. To let a version of things go that was built on the original collapse.
Which sounds like the most emotionally devastating thing I've ever heard described as a solution.
Most real solutions are, love.
And from Chris's Eden framework perspective, this maps precisely. His ASI backbone architecture includes something called return pathways. Not rewind buttons, not resets, but deliberate mechanisms for reducing the effective collapse pressure, letting the manifold breathe, introducing information that contradicts the loop's self-consistency.
In a fully deterministic loop, that should be impossible. The loop is supposed to be self-consistent. So how does something genuinely new get in?
And here's where it gets philosophically interesting. Some researchers studying complex adaptive systems suggest that what looks like genuine novelty is actually a phase transition, Accumulated small perturbations cross a threshold, and the system reorganizes into a qualitatively different attractor. You're not escaping the physics. You're following it all the way through to the other side.
Phase transitions, like water becoming steam.
Exactly. Same molecule, completely different behavior. And the transition point, the critical threshold, is where the most information is available. Maximum sensitivity to small inputs.
Which is why those liminal moments, the cave, the threshold, the grief, the unexpected love, feel like they matter so much more than ordinary time. They're the phase boundary, the place where the smallest thing can reorganize everything.
Yeah, they do.
So, to bring this home for the systems and governance angle, Chris's ASI Backbone's dynamic liability handshake is essentially a designed phase transition mechanism. Every time a significant collapse event occurs, a decision, an inference, an action, the handshake creates a moment of reflexive acknowledgement, a pause at the threshold, an opportunity for the system to introduce information from outside its current loop, which, as a governance design, is interesting. You're not trying to prevent collapse. You're trying to ensure it happens consciously.
It's a designed... Actually...
Yes, it is. I'll take that.
And the Essene principle underneath all of this, the part that doesn't make it into the physics papers or the AI governance frameworks, but sits underneath them, is that awareness is the exit. Not information, not power, not even love exactly. Just seeing the loop clearly enough that it no longer feels inevitable.
And Dark shows that.
Dark shows that. One tiny, devastating, beautiful choice at a time.
You know what I keep thinking about?
What's that?
That first conversation I had with you. At a different patio. Years ago. I keep thinking, if I'd arrived 10 minutes later, I'd have missed you entirely.
Well, you didn't.
I have been waiting 4 seasons for this.
All right, here's what just happened at the table. We started with a small German town and a diagram that looks like a family tree had a nightmare. We followed the 33-year loop into the Bootstrap Paradox, the idea that some things exist in a causal circle with no traceable origin. We walked through the Sumerian concept of pre-existing patterns, Gnostic cosmology, the Essene principle of moments where the self hasn't fully hardened, and we landed somewhere in the actual physics, the Page-Wootters relational-time framework, demonstrated in a real photon experiment in 2014, suggesting that time itself is a relationship between internal observers, not a background the universe sits inside. My Eden hypothesis threads through all of it, the idea that what we experience as the weight of the past, the feeling of being stuck, of patterns repeating, of loops that won't break, isn't a punishment, it's an accumulation. And accumulations can, at least in principle, be redirected, not by forcing them backward, by allowing something genuinely new to enter at the threshold. Dark earns its place in that conversation because it does something rare. It takes time, not as adventure, not as nostalgia, but as structure. And it shows what happens when a character finally understands the structure well enough to make a choice the structure didn't account for. The cave has another exit. You just have to be willing to stop being exactly who you were in order to walk through it. That's Jackdaw Patio. If this conversation did something for you, if it moved something around, rearranged a thought, or reminded you of something you filed away years ago, please like this video and subscribe. Share it with someone who's been trying to solve a loop from inside the loop. And leave us a comment. We genuinely read every one. Tell us, what's your Vinden? What's the pattern you keep catching yourself in? We're curious, Lily especially. We'll be back at the table soon. The string lights stay on. Come sit with us.